There's an economic crisis in Pakistan, a trade war in Europe, a global climate crisis, and China is flexing its muscle at sea and in the air. Who do you think will address these problems? One would think the United Nations. The UN is supposed to maintain peace, dignity and equality on this planet. The world body was founded in 1945. It is tasked with solving global issues and armed with multiple units to carry out this task. But 77 years later, the UN has failed on every possible front. Two recent events headline this failure. One, you have North Korea chairing the UN disarmament body. And if that's bizarre, you also have the United Nations praising China's quote-unquote tremendous achievements on human rights. This is China, the perpetrator of the Uyghur genocide, and now it's short of receiving a human rights award by none other than the United Nations. This is what happened. The UN Human Rights Commissioner was on a 6-day tour of China. She visited Xinjiang. She saw the atrocities that China was committing on Uyghurs. It was a guided tour. But Michelle Bachelet did not condemn China. Instead, she chose to praise President Xi Jinping and his men. And you have to hear her to believe it.
Poverty alleviation and the eradication of extreme poverty, 10 years ahead of its target date, are tremendous achievements of China.
Tremendous achievement. The UN human rights body is praising a country that's orchestrating a genocide. Earlier this week, the UN appointed North Korea as the chair of the Disarmament Commission. North Korea, one of the biggest weapons proliferators in the world. It is currently sitting on top of a nuclear disarmament forum, at the helm of a forum. One observer equated this to putting a serial rapist in charge of a women's shelter. North Korea became the chairman of the World Disarmament Forum on Monday. As we speak, it is leading a body that's supposed to regulate, limit and reduce arms, even weapons of mass destruction. Days before taking over this chairmanship, North Korea fired 3 ballistic missiles, and this has been a pattern for a while now. The United Nations has been missing no opportunity to fail the world. In 2019, when our world was facing an unprecedented crisis, when the Wuhan virus began breaching borders, the World Health Organization was busy covering up for China. It wasted time, it delayed the declaration of a pandemic, and then it failed to hold China accountable. In 2020, the same UN made a mockery of itself again. Its human rights body held an election, and they elected China and Pakistan as members. Some of the biggest human rights violators in the world given a seat at the high table to sit in judgment of others. Earlier this year, the United Nations' incompetence was broadcast live to the world when Russia began its invasion of Ukraine. The United Nations Security Council held an emergency meeting. Ukraine's ambassador openly challenged the UNSC to stop the war.
Because it's too late, my dear colleagues, to speak about de-escalation. Too late. The Russian president declared a war on the record. Should I play the video of your president? You declared the war. It is the responsibility of this body to stop the war. So I call on every one of you to do everything possible to stop the war.
Lip service is all that the UN Security Council could offer. Apologists say the Security Council has its hands tied because Russia had the veto power. But it also had the presidency of the Security Council, and that's precisely why we say that the UN system is broken. It needs reform. It needs to disarm the P5 of the often abused veto powers. The United Nations is sitting on a $3.12 billion budget. It's an enormous outlay. But where's this money going? If this money is being spent on peacekeeping, how is it that at least 6 countries are currently at war? If it's being used to end hunger, why are 811 million people going to bed hungry every night? If the UN is supposedly using the money to protect human rights, why are minorities being persecuted worldwide? There is no peace in the world today because this peacekeeping body has failed. The United Nations has become a tool in the hands of powerful countries. Its verdicts are not enforceable. Its representation is dated. It has failed to reform. Today, the United Nations cannot prevent a war. It cannot even act or react when faced with a pandemic. In short, the United Nations today has become nothing but a bureaucratic mammoth sitting on piles of money, delivering nothing. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.